You know, the specific arithmetic of regret. You add up the years, subtract where you thought you'd be, and the number you're left with feels like a verdict? 10 years, maybe more. A decade that looks from the outside like nothing happened. No promotion, no great love story that lasted. No business that made the news, just time. Moving past you while you were trying to survive something nobody could see. And the cruelest part isn't the years themselves. It's the voice that insists those years are proof that you're too slow, too broken, too far behind to matter anymore. That voice is wrong. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly why. It's 2 a.m. and you're doing the math again, not the productive kind, the punishing kind. You're scrolling through someone's highlight reel, a person from your past, maybe a former colleague, maybe an old friend, and the numbers are piling up. Their title, their house, their second kid, the business they launched, the trip to Portugal that looked effortless, and then there's you who spent the last decade just staying afloat, surviving a marriage that quietly rotted from the inside, surviving a job that paid the bills but hollowed you out by degrees, surviving a version of yourself that kept showing up, kept trying, kept pushing through the specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't show on your face, the kind you can smile through at a dinner party, the kind that only comes out at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and the math gets cruel. You didn't launch anything. You didn't ascend anywhere. You didn't become the person you swore you'd be by this age. You just survived. And somehow, the world around you has decided that surviving doesn't count. That endurance without a highlight reel is the same as failure. That a decade spent holding yourself together while everything tried to come apart is a decade wasted. Here is what I need you to hear right now before we go any further. Surviving is not nothing. Surviving, when the weight was that heavy, is everything. Let me tell you the lie you've been living inside. The lie says, time is linear. That life follows a predictable arc, ambition, effort, result. That the people who moved fast moved right, and the people who moved slowly, or who stood still because life demanded it, fell behind and stayed there. But that's not how any of this actually works. Here's what's true instead. Every system under pressure is reorganizing, not failing. A river doesn't apologize for bending around a mountain. It doesn't look at the cliff in its path and decide it's been defeated. It gathers, it carves, it finds another way through, and it comes out the other side having shaped the landscape permanently. That's what those years were. Not wasted, not empty, not proof of inadequacy. They were pressure work. And here is the unexpected truth that almost no one will say to you, the one that will reframe everything if you let it land. The people who had it easy in the decade you were fighting, they didn't build what you built, they just didn't have to. Ease doesn't develop the same architecture that struggle does. A person who coasted through their 30s on luck and clear skies has a different internal structure than someone who held themselves together through a divorce or a financial collapse or a slow, invisible depression that took years to name, or a career that never went the way the plan said it should. They have comfort. You have load-bearing walls. You cannot see them from the outside, neither can they, but they're there in the way you handle crisis without dissolving, in the way you understand nuance because you've lived in it, in the way you know that nothing is as simple as it looks because you've been on the other side of the thing that looked simple and found out the truth. The garden that grows through drought doesn't produce the same fruit as the one that was watered perfectly on schedule. It produces something sturdier, something that knows how to survive a dry season because it already has. Here's what I want you to do, not later, right now. I want you to think about one moment from the invisible decade. Just one, a moment that cost you something. A moment where you had every reason to stop, to quit the job, leave the city, disappear into a version of yourself that needed far less, and you didn't. You kept going. Maybe not gracefully. Maybe through sheer stubbornness more than wisdom. But you kept going. Hold that moment. Because what happened in that moment wasn't just endurance. Something was being installed in you. Call it discernment. Call it depth. Call it the specific knowledge that only comes from being in the room where it all fell apart and not being destroyed by it. You cannot download that knowledge. You cannot fast track it. You cannot buy it with the right career move or the right relationship or the right zip code. You can only earn it the way you earned it. The slow, grinding, invisible way. Think about who you were at the beginning of that decade. Think about what you didn't know, about yourself, about other people, about what you actually needed versus what you thought you wanted, about what mattered and what was noise. You know more now. Not the book kind of more, not the podcast kind of more, the scar tissue kind, the kind that lives in your body, in your instincts, in the quiet authority of someone who has been tested and not broken. That is, not nothing. That is, in fact, the thing. Because here is what no one talks about when they're celebrating the fast movers. The early achievers, the ones who made it look clean. The second half of a life built on real experience, on actual depth, is categorically different from the second half of a life built on early momentum alone. Early momentum fades. It has to, because it was never built on anything that can hold weight over time. It was built on the right timing, the right connections, the right market, the right decade, but you were being tempered like steel, like something that was never meant to be finished quickly, because what it was becoming required time under pressure, required the cooling and the heating, required the decade that looked like nothing from the outside. The smiths who know what they're doing will tell you, the blade that takes longest in the forge is often the one that holds its edge the longest in use. You are not behind, you are forged. And the person standing at the beginning of this next chapter, this chapter you are standing at the threshold of right now, is not the person who wasted 10 years. They are the person who survived them, who endured them without instructions, without a map, without anyone telling them that what they were going through was worth it. It was worth it. Every single quiet, invisible, exhausting day of it. I need you to stop running that calculation. The one where you measure your life against someone else's timeline. The one where you decide at 41 or 47 or 53 that the gap is too wide now, that you waited too long, that the window closed while you were just trying to keep the lights on. That calculation is built on a premise that has never been true. It assumes that life is a race, that all lanes start at the same place, that the person at the front deserved to be there because they worked harder or wanted it more or were made of better material. But, that's not what happened. Because you've been in the real version of this, the version where the path collapsed under you through no failure of your own, where the decade that disappeared wasn't laziness. It was grief or survival, or the specific courage it takes to stay present in a life that wasn't working while you slowly, quietly rebuilt the conditions for one that would. That took more from you than most people will ever be asked to give, and it left you with something most people will never have. I want you to say this, not out loud, just inside. I'm not starting late, I am starting right. Because here's what is true, and I need you to feel the weight of it. The person who starts at 45, carrying a decade of real experience, real failure, real self-knowledge, that person does not start from zero. They start from depth. They do not make the mistakes the 25-year-old makes with the same recklessness because they have already paid for the education. They do not waste years chasing the wrong things because the wrong things already showed them their emptiness. They do not need to be told what matters. They have lived the lesson. You are not a beginner. You are a different kind of expert, an expert in the thing that cannot be taught from the outside. What it costs to keep going when it made no visible sense to do so. The version of you that survived those years, they didn't just hold on. They built something quietly, without applause, without anyone watching, without any guarantee that it would ever amount to anything, but it amounts to this. To you, here, now, still in it, still fighting, still refusing to accept that the story is over just because one chapter was brutal. That refusal is not stubbornness. That is the clearest evidence of who you actually are. The quiet ones don't announce their comeback. They don't post about the rebuild. They don't need the validation of a crowd who never saw the fight. They simply put one foot in front of the other, again, today in the direction of the life they are still building. And one day, not in a fantasy, but in actual real time, someone will look at what you've made and say, "How did you do it?" And you will know exactly how, because you remember the decade that looked like nothing. And you will know in your bones that it was everything. This is the moment, not the moment after this. Not next year. Not when the conditions are right, or the fear is gone, or the timing is finally perfect. This moment. This exhausted, uncertain, beginning again moment. This is the foundation. And you are ready to build. Tomorrow doesn't need to look like a transformation. It just needs to look like one step. One decision that takes you 1 degree closer to the person you know you're still becoming. Not a dramatic gesture. Not a grand announcement. Just the quiet, deliberate choice to act as if the decade you survived was preparation, because it was. Write down one thing you would have started 5 years ago if you hadn't been surviving. One thing, not the whole plan. Not the finished version, just the first shape of it. The seed before the garden, and then begin. Because the version of you that comes out the other side of this next chapter won't be someone who overcame the lost years. They'll be someone who finally understood what those years were for. You didn't waste 10 years. You survived them, you were shaped by them, and now, finally, fiercely, quietly, you are ready for them to matter. If this reached something in you, share it with someone who's been quietly rebuilding. They need to hear they're not alone. Subscribe to Unbroken. New videos every week.